Welcome back to howtoav.tv. We're on the Avixa stand over at ISE 2019 and we're lucky enough to be joined by Eddie Brixton of DPA Microphones, who's just left the Avixa Flash Track stand where you've been talking to the AV industry about voice clarity, getting that right in a system. Is that right, Eddie?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so where are we going to start with this one? Are we going to start with technology, or are we going to start with the person and their voice and getting that part right?
Yeah, I think we'll just leave the technology a little, because the first thing that's important whenever we want to make any kind of AV installation where somebody has to make a speech, that is how is the audience, the ability of hearing, for instance. That's a very important question. Normally when we design, we make designs for normal hearing people, but research has found that perhaps half of an audience maybe have a hearing that is less than normal. So that's a place to start, to find out what kind of audience do we actually have for this installation, and how do we consider that when we predict what the intelligibility in this installation actually will be in the end.
And I guess when we're thinking about our audience and their hearing abilities, we're still not going to the technology yet. We need to think about the presenter themselves. And before we look at product, before we think about our system, we need to make sure that the person is fully briefed. A little bit of training can go a long way with regards to being understood, clear voice, getting the microphone in the right place, and how we talk to people. Pace and everything is going to make a real difference.
Exactly, because if the word is not pronounced, nobody can understand it. So that really depends on how trained the speaker is, because you may be very trained, very educated, and you're pronouncing every word, every syllable correctly, and others will do it in another way. And if it's untrained people that will talk, then you will have to consider that the intelligibility of the place should be even better, I should say.
We need to speak to our presenters, give them a little bit of training on clarity and pace and even use of the microphone. There are many, many people, real confident speakers, and the first thing that they're going to say is, I don't need a microphone.
Yeah, they say.
And the chances are they're wrong.
Absolutely, and even if they have one, they may use it in the wrong way. It gets louder whenever you're up here, and that's a problem, Now comes the room,
okay.
Because what kind of room are we using? For instance, in many telepresence rooms, that's really a problem to get the systems work correctly, because the reverberation time is too long. The positioning of the microphone should be out of the image, and you shouldn't be able to see it, and the loudspeakers as well. And then you have the microphones and loudspeakers living their own life in a space with too much reverberation, and that leaves a problem for those pure guys that has to make the installation and make it work. So the first thing is basically to get the reverberation in a good state. So keeping it low, having a good balance with all frequencies, as well as any piece of audio equipment. The room should also have a reverberation time that's constant with frequency, because that makes things much easier in every sense.
So with regards to environment, scale of room, reflectivity, all of these things can be tested before the audience arrive.
Absolutely.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
However,
once
the audience arrives, things are going to change straight away, aren't they?
But normally they will add some absorption to the room, so
a little bit of consideration. So when you are testing a room, if the room is empty,
please leave your coats on, because that improves the acoustics.
and then ambient noise as well is something that needs to be.
Noise is of course a problem, because basically when we listen to a voice, the intelligibility is at maximum when it has a level that is the same as when you speak to a person next to you. If you raise the level, then you will have a problem. Basically, it gets less intelligible in that case. So just amplifying to get above the noise is not always the answer. It's better to reduce the noise. That's a better policy in that case.
Okay, let's look at types of microphone next. And of course, there are many different types of microphone, all with different applications. What types of microphones are we considering for a live presentation, for voice and for conferencing?
Well, it really depends on how visible the microphone should be or should not be in that case. It's also depending on the kind of background noise you may have. Also electromagnetic background noise, because a microphone may be sensitive to electromagnetic fields. For instance, if you have an induction loop in the room, which you have in many cases, and if you have a dynamic microphone, it can be a problem. Another problem is actually some of these installations, if you have sensors, ultrasonic sensors, they have very high levels, and it goes into microphones and some wireless systems. They get totally messed up if they suddenly can hear more than 100 decibel of level coming from the ceiling, and you bend over, then there's less because you're shadowing for it, and it goes completely bananas. So there's a lot of things outside the audio range you have to consider also when selecting microphones and your, for instance, wireless systems and things like that.
Understanding whether that microphone is going to be fixed in one place or whether it's going to be a portable microphone is the next consideration perhaps? Yeah,
for instance, if you use a lavalier microphone, if you put a microphone here, you lose around 10 dB of intelligibility in the intelligibility range of 3 to 4 kilohertz. And so you have to compensate or use a microphone that automatically compensates for this. That's very important. Very often you don't just take the best linear microphone, you put it there, but as a matter of fact, the sound field here is not that good. So even if you have a linear microphone, you get a bad result. You have to compensate for all the time.
Are you a fan of headset microphones, even though the presenters often aren't, Eddie? Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Yeah, I like it because if you get a microphone up here, you have 10 dB more signal compared to a position down here, and you'll have it following your head all the time. So you have a much more constant speech level. So that's absolutely to prefer.
And although your presenter might not like the idea initially, the fact that they've got both hands free to really gesticulate or to pick up and to demonstrate makes a real difference.
Exactly, yeah. You have to consider how to persuade anyone to take a headset on because that would help so much.
And then let's talk about loudspeaker types, loudspeaker positioning.
Yeah, I mean, less is more when we talk about loudspeakers. So just putting loudspeakers all over the place normally doesn't help you unless it's a very dry space, because you'll put more energy into the room, and in one position this energy is needed, but it's not needed in other positions. So you have to use an intelligent system that it will only put sound out where it's needed, so you get a high gain before feedback in your system, so you really can gain it as much as what is needed. And then you have, of course, to consider the loudspeaker type, how it is. For instance, also in video teleconferencing systems, often the sound comes from the screen or from a sound bar or something like that. That's not always the solution for that, because then you have a system that's too poor, that's been equalized too much to reach a reasonable frequency response and things like that. Then it's better to have a system that's not manipulated very much, but just plays by itself, almost an easygoing system that will normally leave you with a much better result in that case.
So in a permanent installation, it's much easier to get that loudspeaker positioning correct, both for the position of the audience and the position of the presenter. One of the main problems that you get with a portable system, however, and everybody's experienced this, is that the likelihood is that a portable system is going to get placed right next to where the presenter is.
Exactly.
And you'll explain the problems to us, and you'll explain to us how we should do that right.
Exactly. I mean, if you have a loudspeaker system with high directivity, so you can control the directivity, you'll get rid of the problem. But normally you don't have, and that's a problem. Also, of course, the microphone, how is it directed? In critical cases, you may be better off with fixed positions of microphones and loudspeakers, so it's not moving around in that case. But if you have a presenter moving around, then of course the microphone should be at the presenter. That's the way it is. And you have to consider how to put your speaker system. And that actually leads us to another thing. It's about the prediction of any system. You have different kind of programs where you can put up type of loudspeaker, you can see what is the coverage like, what is the speech intelligibility actually. And normally we only look at the audience area, actually which should look at all areas, the stage and the walls and whatever, to see what kind of sound is projected where it's not needed, because that can help you make a better design that optimizes, so we only put sound in places where it is needed. That should be a basic thing to do whenever, if you have the tool in the first way, just do it in that way, because you have a better way of assessing a system in the end. And as a final thing, of course, one problem in this field is sometimes that what people sell is boxes with equipment. What they should sell is actually quality, sound quality. So you should predict the sound quality and you should document it when your installation is finished. That's important because that's what people buy. Actually, people don't want any boxes. They would rather get rid of them. But they just don't want this thing that sound may be amplified at the last row as well as the front row. And that's it. How you're doing it, the less equipment you put in there, the better, basically. And what you sell is sound quality, and you have to consider how to do that in the right way.
So I think finally the best result that you're trying to get is clarity, but in the most natural way possible.
Absolutely.
Not too loud,
Nope.
not too high a frequency. Make sure that everyone in your audience believes that they are listening to your voice as opposed to an amplified sound. So teach your presenters first of all. Choose the right type of microphone, understand your audience, the noise, the interactivity from them, the size of the audience.
Yep.
Look at your environment, look at your loudspeaker placement. Anything else that we've missed?
No, you are a perfect consultant now. Educated for it.
I've learned a few things today. Eddie, thank you so much for your help. Thank you for your
welcome.
time.
Yes,
Please
thank you.
join us again soon at howtoav.tv.